The eye that was open on Friday. The portent and the portent's floods tide. Ribbons of flesh swarming downward like a school of leeches deserting some unlit cataclysm. And a briery phantom I see, Stygian and erect, saying, here is the untranslation of the world. Even though you are subtracted from the visible.
how do you make a tour fresh? How do I make an introduction to my work exciting for me? That's a problem. In some ways, I feel that I'm talked out. I've been living with this work for quite a number of years. And it started with the elm tree. And that was 2003. The giant elm got Dutch elm disease on campus on Thayer Street in front of the Watson Institute. Had to be cut down. A decision was made by the Public Art Committee to try to do something with the remnants of the tree. And so I was asked by President Simmons, who was on that committee, along with Joanne Conklin and other members of the Brown community, to see if I had an idea that would put the tree to some good use. And so I thought, okay, I love the tree. I love trees. Who doesn't? They have a lot of meaning. They have a lot of emotional weight to them, aside from the beauty or the struggle that we see in trees. So I said to her, Ruth, give me the tree. Give me the whole tree. And I will make something happen with it. And she said, well, I need more information than that. So you go home, think about it, and come back with a plan. And if it's a good plan, and you have details, I will give you some funding to make whatever it is that you say you want to do that I like, make it happen. And so she did. And the idea was to use the tree as a starting point for teaching courses about all the things that interest me, which basically is the creative process. So here's a prod for doing something that I've never done before. That is what's exciting. That's why talking about it is not as exciting, but I could see myself now going into some direction that I haven't been before, so it's going to be okay. I'm going to be all right. And you're going to have to help me too. I teamed up with Rhode Island School of Design faculty, John Dunnigan, and Ruth is at Brown, Roseanne Summerson, the president of RISD, who was the head of the furniture department. And we decided we would give courses about the tree. They were primarily interested in the substance of the tree, and John Dunnigan is a wonderful artist who crafts beautiful things with wood. And I undo what he does. He makes it neat, and I make it rough. At least I want to undo it. So we were a good combination to bounce off of each other. He taught them how to do it, and I taught them how to undo it. We taught courses not just about using the wood, but using the idea of tree, the magic of nature and life. What happened near this tree? Did somebody propose to someone near this tree? Did somebody have a fight at the tree? Was somebody married under the tree? Trees have been the locus for things throughout history that are important to individuals, dogs, and cultures. All right, so a few years later, I started getting interested in making something myself out of the tree. And this piece over here is a slice from the inside of the tree, where we learned that the tree was actually made up of two saplings that came together. And we found out when it was lifted to be put on a truck to go to the sawmill, chain snapped, fell down, the logs broke in half. And what you saw was bark that was growing not on the outside of the tree, but on the inside of this massive structure. And that was a great surprise. And of course, it changed everything because I had twice as much wood. So how did I get to where we are today in this exhibition, which is titled What Remains? Why do I make stuff? Why have I chosen to spend my life as an artist? I think it's about, in one sense, it's really about filling time. What am I going to do today? How can I be alive? How can I find out something that I don't know? And of what value is that to me? And is it of any value to somebody else? So the question of discovering something is really what drives me. To discover something that I didn't know the answer to, or something I thought I knew, but in fact, turns out I didn't know anything about it. Can't tell you the whole story. I'll tell you about this. I am not getting stronger. I'm getting significantly weaker. I used to be able to lift that piece myself and take it from one side of the studio to the other. I can't even do it with John on the other side of the slab. So I decided, when a second tree got sick and I was offered it, I decided, okay, I'll take that tree, but I'm going to make it so that I can move it myself. And this is it. By cutting it into 56 pieces, I thought, could pick up each piece and move it. So it's a very simple problem to solve. It's a simple problem to solve, but there's probably much more to that. It's about getting older. It's about getting closer to the end of the story. And what does that mean? It's always been something I've thought about, is getting older. Do you remember when you were 12, you wanted to be 16? And when you were 16, you wanted to be 18? And then at 21, you could drink? And who knows what else you said to yourself, I want to be older. I always thought that when I got older, I would know more about life. But we actually know less. But there's so much more to know. So I think that part of the answer to the question I posed earlier is, why do I do this? Is to find out more. And there's another aspect to it. There are the moments of joy that you get occasionally when you make a discovery, when you get an instinct about something. And that moment is priceless, because it is a brief moment within this larger expanse of time that we live through. So I've often thought that reinventing myself is the most important thing that I could learn to do. I always thought I was going to die very young. And I think that had something to do with it. My father died when he was 48. And so, and this is a typical syndrome for people who has a parent or a loved one, particularly a parent, who dies at a certain age, and then you think, well, you're going to die at that age too. And then when I made it to 48, so that means 88. So I thought, I thought about death a lot. And I was also interested in it when I went to museums as a young man, as a boy, and gravitated toward the collections of Egyptian art, which is all devoted to the afterlife and the prolonging of concepts of life and existence. Well, we should continue the tour, and maybe you want to know a few things about the process. But I hope you'll want to know a few things that aren't about the process. So while we're here for a moment, I want somebody in this class. See, that's the other thing. You teach for so many fucking years that you just can't escape being professorial. But I'm not a teacher anymore. So, what can I tell you? Have I said anything that made you think of anything that you want to know something more about? Or has something occurred to you from standing here? Yes?
What do you think of these people passing in and out of the space?
Doesn't bother me at all. No, that's the way this thing is. You have a situation and you have people coming in and going out. And Kira knows my story inside and out. So I wasn't surprised that Kira was leaving, because she has, important work to do. Oh, is that what you're doing? Oh, see?
So how about doing something so much bigger than you? Something, a massive former living thing? Like, did it make you feel smaller or bigger?
Oh, you mean dealing with this tree?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, God, Forrest, I'm so happy you came. Thank you. This is Forrest Gander, a dear friend. When did you come to Brown?
20-some years ago.
Oh, only 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I met him when I was already grown up.
No, you were still a kid. Yeah.
He's a poet, and Forrest, well, I'll tell you the story about Forrest, and we'll get back to this.
They want to hear the other story. About
No, I got to tell you this story, because I'll forget it, because you get older and you forget. So, see? Forrest, I asked him to come to my studio and walk around with me and look at the work I'm doing. And so he came, and he looked, and he started talking about things, and he said, oh, prickly spine of witch hazel. And I said, what? So, and then he said, well, it reminds me of, so the poem that Laurie read was the result of my saying to Forrest, when he's walking around looking at things, and then words were coming out of his mouth, and they were all titles. And I'm bad at titles. I have a lot of pieces that are called Untitled Number 1. So I said, would you do me a favor? Would you send me the list? And could I use them as titles? And he said, sure. So 3 months later, he sent me a typed piece of paper in the mail with a note that you can't email these things. And he said, use it however you want. Use it as titles or use it as a poem, whatever you want. So thank you.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. And that was the first of the pieces that are in the catalog. And oh, by the way, you know what you get? Because you're the audience, everyone gets a catalog. And you don't have to pay $2 if you're a student. So make sure that everyone gets a catalog. And then you can read Forrest's poem. So working on something bigger than yourself, the reason I said that is such a good question. I'm going to tell you that story in the next room. Let's go next door. Wasn't there a woman who asked the question before Forrest? Who?
Someone asked about coming in with
Oh, all right. Oh, but that is another point that I think is interesting. And I know it relates somehow to the way I work, the way I think, and so forth and so on, which is dealing with what you got. And that's a good thing to learn how to do. No matter what it is, you can adapt and adjust. And I think that's also very much an important part of creating. And so everything I do is kind of filtered through that membrane of I can survive it. I can find a way. I can get depressed, and I can feel better, and I can feel great, and I can live through that too. So the big thing, you meant like 15,000, where are you, Forrest? You meant the 15,000 pound log?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm flashing back to December 3rd, 2003, when we went to cut the tree down. On a particular day that there were very few students on campus, so that they wouldn't chain themselves to the tree, not knowing that it was sick. And then signs were put up everywhere that would tell people the story of the tree so that no one was going to cause a big problem. And I would go there every day for several hours at different times of day, taking pictures of the tree. I have 3,000 pictures of the tree before it was taken down. And there are all kinds of conditions, including snow at night. And I was really getting, into the tree. And then the day it was cut down, this was also part of my condition for taking on this project. I said to the person who was put in charge of it by President Simmons that I am going to be able to tell the man who's cutting a tree down where to cut every log. And they said, fine, you can do that. And I am going to keep everything that comes from the tree, including the leaves, the twigs, the branches, the things that go through the machine that grinds it up. And then I need a building to put everything in that's away from campus, because the tree has virus which will spread to the other trees on campus if it's not at least 3 or 4 miles away. And all of that was given to me. And I have a friend who said to me, you have such a cushy life. You get everything you want. And he's actually, I've known him for 50 years, and he is really jealous. And I feel bad for him, but that's another story. So maybe I took on the project that's so big because it was so big. And I can do that. And then there's another reason I know is also part of it. And that is that I don't want to die. It's really about I am going to live and be happy doing what I do. And I found that in teaching and in taking challenges and making something out of something that wasn't before, against all odds. And people that say, oh, you can't do that, I never take that as an answer. And I try to find a way to make that person love me. But that's just a joke. It's not a joke?
So much.
Does somebody else have a question? Yes.
You mentioned back in the earlier room that once you couldn't move the big log, then you decided to just have 56 smaller pieces. What will you do when you can't move those 56 smaller pieces?
I can't do them now. I didn't get to that. I overestimated my strength and their weight. And also they're fragile because they get thin in the center. And so if you don't lift it carefully, if you were to lift it from both ends, it would break. So you have to lift it part way in. And so you have to feel, this is another thing, empathy. Very important to everything we do, and it's certainly important to the process of creating. And material, one has to develop empathy for material so that you can get the feeling of when something is going too far. But then you have to break it sometimes before you really realize how far is too far. So I had two people and they moved them carefully. Anybody else have a question? Okay, so then how do we get to here? In order to cut them, I knew that they would break when they started to dry going through a big saw, and if I put a membrane on one side of it, like a Band-Aid, big giant Band-Aid, then maybe it won't crack. And so that's when I decided I would use carbon fiber to strengthen the big thick 2-inch slab so that when it went through the saw, that fiber would hold it together. It was an interesting choice. One, I used carbon fiber because I had never used it before, but I had seen people use it, and it is super light and super strong. So that was perfect to try to make something, to keep something as light as possible so I could work with it. But then I liked its blackness. And I liked the process. I've always been making things in which I was pushing it to its limit and then letting it go beyond its limit so that I could see what that limit might be. But that limit also changes. And that process exposed other ideas that I think of as about life. And so it's searching for, it's really about searching for meaning. And in the search for meaning and in the object, can you communicate? And how does that thing that you made through that search communicate? And what does it communicate? You following me? So the question might be, what does that piece communicate? Let's go up to it. So, quiet. It's quiet. Another word? Anyone else?
Black road with moonlight on it.
A what?
A black road.
A black road of
moonlight on it.
Yes, yes. Yes. Not any other?
It's a place to hide.
What?
It's a place to hide.
A place to hide.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Ah, interesting. Very interesting. A place to hide. Yeah. That could be a title. What?
Luminous.
Luminous. Yeah. What else?
Velvet. Velvet.
Velvet. So let's think about velvet. So when you think about velvet, what do you think of? What do you think of when you think about velvet?
Dogs playing cards.
I think of a beautiful dress on someone.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh, that Singer Sargent.
Could be a dress. Oh, yeah.
You know that lady? What's that painting?
Madame X.
Madame X, yes, with that beautiful dress. So sensuousness is also something I'm interested in sensuality. And I don't want you to touch this piece, but if you could, it would drive you crazy. My pieces, I make them to touch, and to get to the point where it is so sensuous that it may drive you crazy. There's a process that is quiet, and you're using an abrasive to sand the rough down to the smooth, but you get to the smooth through various stages, and there you get to feel it and touch it as you go, and you get to think about things. So in the making of things, this is another reason that I do like to make things, is that there's a great satisfaction, I find, in using my hands, but then translating that into all of the various emotions that come from touch. That's why I love infants. There's nothing like the feeling of an infant in your hands. So I'd like to go to this piece, and I think we're going to probably end with that. We need to end, don't we?
Oh, yeah, sometime. 10 minutes.
Okay. So this is the, well, this is almost the last piece finished in the show. Come over here quickly, I gotta show you something. Take a look at this from the side. I finished this piece today. I couldn't leave well enough alone. So when I was at my studio, before I got here, I brought over 2 things that I'm working on right now. All right? And I brought them over because I just got the hunch that I needed them here. And so when I got here, these are going to be good. I'm so excited about this. This is new work. This is my new work. And you can see it's made for carrying. For me, I could carry 100 of these. That's going to be so exciting. So, but then I came in and I said, I put them behind this piece. When Joanne came and saw that I had brought these pieces there, and she said, "You're such a kid." That is so much fun to hear. So this piece now, I don't know whether actually this will be this piece or not, but there's something really good going on in there that never would have happened had I not come back with them today. And I was looking for something, I suppose. Maybe I was looking to see if I could get a rise out of Joanne also, but I couldn't. She knows what she has. So back to this piece. What do you think of this? Or what do you ask about this? Where is it going?
Where did it go?
Okay, so the first thing that I thought of is that I'm going where it is going. So I don't know where it's going, but I'm going there. And I'm going to weather the storm and create a new thing in a new place. That's the story. Another thought? A question? You know, sometimes I tell my class, one thing is that one of the things I think about teaching that's important is, especially in art class where you have people that aren't necessarily confident about their abilities, which is mostly everybody, no matter how good you are, is to help you, to draw you out. There's nothing that you could say that's wrong or not significant. It doesn't matter. I am looking for an exchange. Could you please exchange an idea with me? Because if you don't, I'm going to fail you. Come
What do you
on.
make of something that's so like loose or slack, but yet is also tight and frozen using the materials?
What do I make of it?
Yeah.
Time. Time is important to that process. And things happen over time, which is why when I explore a thing, a material, a process, that it's fascinating to me because there are so many variables that are at play. And what I do, you said, what do I make of it? Does that mean what do I think of it?
I don't know. How do you process an object that has so much internal tension with these materials that are kind of loose and chaotic, but yet they're also really glued together and rigid?
But they start loose and chaotic, and they end up rigid.
So now they're kind of super organized.
They are super organized, but that could be a problem. And the problem for that in this piece was I worked on it for 11 months, and it was only 8 feet tall, and I wanted it bigger and taller. And my ceiling had a certain limit to it. But as it got bigger and more massive, it wasn't getting any better. In fact, it was getting worse. And so this piece, I'm getting away from your question to something that is important that I want to cover before we stop. But the answer to your question is, it's the challenge of that range of time and differentiation of the state of the form that is what makes it interesting. And to understand how you can use that to your advantage is the goal. So the dilemma was the show was about to open and the piece sucked. I wasn't facing it. Jennifer Avery works in the same studio I work in. And so Jennifer would see it frequently. And I could get a vibe from her, but I didn't want to say anything. But I knew that she was somewhat skeptical. But it had its ups and downs. But there was a certain point, it's getting close to showtime, and I'm thinking, I don't know what the hell to do with this piece. And so Jennifer came over. Jennifer, do you remember that conversation?
Yes, we were playing Dollhouse with your mock-up of the studio, and I kept trying to take it out. And then I just confessed, I'm sorry, it's the weakest piece. You need to do something about it.
That's really great. That's another thing that's important in everything is feedback periodically and at the right time when you're ready for it. So when she said that, and I said, yeah, I know it sucks. And thank you.
You're welcome.
The question is, what do you do then?
You hit it with sticks.
This isn't the first time. What did you say?
Oh, no, I said you hit it with sticks.
Hit it with a stick, right, yeah. Not a big, powerful thing like this. Stick is going to mean nothing. I thought you could. I just thought of the guy who came to my studio a couple of months earlier, and he was very impressed with my work before. The last time he came to the studio, and this time he came and he looked at this piece, and he said, I said, what do you think? He said, I think you should throw it out of a building. So help me God. He didn't. I forgot to invite him to the opening. I forgot. I wanted to call him and have him come over before the clip. Yeah. But I knew that something radical had to happen, and he was right. And that's what a lot of it comes back to teaching and hearing yourself talk with students about what to do under certain circumstances. And often I would say you get to a point where you don't know what to do, then you got to do something completely different, and you have to risk losing what you have. And so I knew I had to do that. And what I figured was a way of destroying it, but slowly, might be an interesting thing. So I had someone who operates big sandblasting equipment to blast big hulls of steel ships. And I had him come over to the studio. We set this up outside, and I was pointing with a stick. My back was out that day, and it was like crippling me. And I would point to him, and this depth has been blasted away a foot. So what you saw originally was what you saw was something that was massive, but with that kind of density, and it was just nothing. And it became something. And then I added some things to it before we had it blast, because I knew it had to be opened up. And the story, if this has a story, if this has a meaning, and I think it has a meaning, or meanings, and it resonates, came about because of risking. When you have nothing left to risk, then you might make a good move. And that is, I've had that lesson a million times, but did I learn it? No, until I was at the edge. And being at the edge is also the place where growth occurs. Yes.
So your catalog is for Myra.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. Myra and I were married for 53 years. We were childhood sweethearts. She was 16. No, she was 15, I was 16. And she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 3.5, almost 4 years ago. And I had accumulated a number of sabbaticals that I hadn't taken over the years because I was too busy doing the Creative Arts Council and the Granoff Center, and I was afraid if I left for a sabbatical that I'd come back and it would all be changed. And I'm right. But, so I had time to help Myra when she needed me. Ed Katz.
Class of 71, your student.
I got to talk about that. We'll close with that. Myra's in that story too. It's so interesting that you came at that moment. Myra said, he was at the kitchen table. Come on over, Ed. I saw Ed when I was getting a sandwich today, and he said, "Oh, you have a nice show. I heard you had a good show." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I haven't seen it yet." And I said, "Well, you have until Sunday," and here he is. So Ed was a student when I was just starting out.
67 to 71.
Yep. And he was hell-bent on making sculpture. And so he came, I remember this, and this story may be distorted, but a lot of the guys that were in my classes would be friends with Myra, and came over to the house in the afternoon, and Ed wanted to talk about whether he should, this is what I'm remembering, whether he should go to graduate school in sculpture or go to dental school. Is that true?
That's pretty close, yeah.
Tell me how you remember it.
I remember chatting with Myra and having that discussion, and of course, sculpture was my love because of my relationship with you and friends who were also in the department, and I suddenly realized that I really had no talent for it. I was good working with my hands, but I didn't really have the ability to see things the way I think an artist sees things, and I felt I could, you suddenly realize you can never approach or be as good as the teacher, and I think I kind of came to that conclusion and recognized that my talents really lay with working with my hands, and which is what I enjoyed as a craftsman. And there's a distinct difference, I think, between being a craftsman and an artist, and that's hard to put into words, but fortunately I was very, very lucky, and I think I made the right decision.
But I disagree with him. And this is a big problem when people start to impose certain limits on themselves. But you made the choice that you made, and it was a good choice for you, and you're happy, and you're great, and Myra goes to you.
Yes.
Periodically now. So, it's so good to see you.
It's good to be here.
Now, who will remind me where I was in my story?
Sorry.
Kira?
You'd gone on sabbatical finally to help take care of Myra.
Oh, right. Okay, back to your question. So, but Myra said you got to go to work every day, and that's what I did. Every day I went to work after she was, taken care of, and it was the work that sustained me through a very difficult period. And I think, when I think back on it, Myra was very strong and tough and gritty, and she didn't let things beat her down very easily. Chemotherapy and radiation, and it's not easy, but we were very lucky to have 2.5 years, far exceeding what was predicted. And I think that my being happy during that period at work helped her. Because often people who are very ill, they say that it was harder on my family than it is or was on me. And that might be true for some people. So this piece was came into being during the last 11 months of her life. And so the catalog is dedicated to her. Because the impact that woman made on me, but also the impact she made on a lot of people. So.
What's it called?
What Remains. And What Remains came from another title from an essay that Brian Kelly, who was a student of mine here years after, he's not as old as Ed Katz, And he was talking about that. So read his essay too, after you read Forrest's poem. Thank you very much.